Chris Jericho needs to beat Hangman Page at All Elite Wrestling's All Out, and we'll tell you why next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name's Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti for the best conversations in AEW, WWE, NXT, and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. So our main event for All Elite Wrestling's All Out is Chris Jericho versus Hangman Page for the AEW Championship. While we're pushing Hangman Page as trying to be the first AEW champion, many are suspecting and believing that Jericho will be the first AEW champion. Who needs this title more?
Yeah. I think the question is who needs the championship more versus who does AEW need to have the championship more?
True.
I think that Hangman Page needs the title more, but I think right now, based on where AEW is, being that it's still in its infancy, still trying to get the ball rolling, I think that AEW needs to have a guy like Chris Jericho hold the championship first. Reason I say that is, and I keep pointing this out, they're still very much a startup company.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't gone to TV yet. You're going to need somebody to have the title and carry the title who is a noticeable guy, a respected, more established guy within the wrestling industry. And when you look at a guy like Chris Jericho, he's been everywhere. He's done everything you can possibly do within the wrestling industry. When you look at some of their goals, saying that they want to try to capture the lapsed fan and bring them back. When you look at the Attitude Era, whether it was, what WCW was doing during the time and Chris Jericho's time there as Lionheart, or even actually ECW, he spent some time in ECW, right. Or obviously when he was in the WWF, WWE, being one of the more established guys during that era.
Right.
If you're trying to capture those lapsed fans and bring them back, there's really nobody better on your roster right now than Chris Jericho to hold the title. So right. I'm going to say that AEW right now, based on where they are, what their goals are going to TV, they need Chris Jericho to hold the title more. But I think Hangman himself, to establish himself, needs it, but I don't think it's time for that yet.
Well, here's the thing. The way they're building Hangman Page so far, it's like you're trying to get behind him as this kind of sympathetic babyface. At least that's what I saw in the recent episode of Road to All Out where they interviewed Jim Ross. Now, we're recording this a few days before the newest episode comes out. So we don't know what's happening Wednesday night, but still that interview, it just seems like to me, I can get behind Hangman Page to win, but just not yet.
Mm-hmm.
What I've been trying to explain to people outside this podcast is it shouldn't matter who the first champion is. It should matter who the second champion is. And that's how you determine who's going to be the first champion. Now, if Hangman wins, who could take the title off of him? And as you mentioned, they don't really have any top heels yet. They still have to build them. Yes, we have Jericho, but we also have Pac, Shawn Spears, MJF, and those guys haven't necessarily been built up yet to a mainstream audience to be, heels that people can hate or enjoy, whatever term you want to use. Jericho, on the other hand, you already are adding prestige to the title because it's Chris Jericho, the first undisputed WWF champion, a guy that has won the Intercontinental Championship in both New Japan and WWE, a man that pretty much made a name for himself trying to feud with Goldberg, but Goldberg would not feud with him. Went all over the world, ECW, Mexico, Japan, United States, all that stuff. There's a lot of clout to Chris Jericho. And the fact that he's able to resurrect his career numerous times through numerous characters, people recognize Chris Jericho. So that's why he needs to be the champion. Now, who becomes the second champion? Well, you could go Omega. You could go Hangman Page and build him up as the sympathetic babyface, maybe like the chaser to like a Johnny Gargano, where, some guys are just better chasers than they are champions. And that could be Hangman Page. Jon Moxley, technically undefeated in AEW. You could go Cody Rhodes. There's so many avenues you could go with Chris Jericho being the AEW champion because they built up so many baby faces, because in the independent wrestling scene, they just love work rate and will respect the work rate and support the work rate more than the character.
Yeah. And that I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things I wanted to point out. Chris Jericho is an established star within the wrestling industry, and his name's going to carry further than Hangman Page. If you go and you ask 10 out of 10 people, unless they're a hardcore wrestling fan, I'm sure a good majority of them won't know who Hangman Page is. And that's not meant to be a knock on him. It's just that Chris Jericho was a wrestler that was he was a focal point of the biggest boom in the wrestling era has ever seen.
Yes.
So he's more established. If you ask those same 10 people, it's more likely that they're going to know who Chris Jericho is than Hangman Page. And that's something they need right now, because going to TV, the fact that they're going to be trying to appeal to a larger audience, they need a guy like Chris Jericho to carry the title, to help establish the company, to help bring prestige to it. And then obviously at some point, somebody could take the belt off to him, whether it's Moxley, whether it's Omega, whether it ends up being Hangman Page. Now, the other thing is, you talk about draw power. To this point, AEW has been very good about selling out arenas in all of their events.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's going to get much harder to do that on a week-to-week basis, especially when they go to TV. They have to keep people's interest. They have to make sure that people are still excited. Product has to feel fresh, and you need somebody to draw the house. So I was stunned, because when we had the conversation about Orange Cassidy, people kept saying, he's a draw, he's a draw, he's a draw. Yeah, I get it. He's a draw when he's going to wrestle in front of 100 people at the local VFW, but that doesn't mean he's a draw in the wrestling, not at this level, not at what AEW is trying to do. When you're trying to go mainstream, Chris Jericho, there's numbers there to prove it. T-shirt sales, the ticket sales during the Attitude Era. You look at the subscriptions. There was a huge bump in subscriptions for New Japan World when he went over and wrestled Kenny Omega. That's a draw. That's what they need. That's not like saying, oh, well, all the fans that loved him. Well, if there's 100 people in the room and they're all cheering for him, that's great. But that doesn't mean like he's going to go and be accepted to the masses, especially when you're going to TV.
Right.
Chris Jericho's done that time and time again, and he's proven he can do that. That's what a draw actually is.
And don't forget,
Steve Austin's a draw. Jericho's a draw.
Right, and he's a top podcast, not just in wrestling, like a top podcast in podcasting.
Yep.
Obviously his band is very huge right now. He get a lot of plays on YouTube, and they're opening up for Nickelback now. Some people don't like Nickelback, but just recently opened for Nickelback at Mohegan Sun here in Connecticut. So, like you said, there's definitely that draw there. And that's the point of they need to add prestige to this title quick. And you don't want to get into where WWE is right now, where you have guys coming back like The Undertaker, like Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and they end up main eventing over your top champions because they're just not quote unquote draws. Now, obviously, the argument that can also be said about, who are they actually targeting? Now, are they trying to target a mainstream audience? They say no, but they kind of have to.
That's crap. Yes, they're trying to attract a mainstream audience. How the hell do you think they're going to pay the wrestlers? They're going to have money to go out and do more advertising and get bigger and graduate from doing these smaller venues to larger venues and eventually, hopefully, stadiums and attracting the top talent from around the world. You have to pay people. The only way you pay people is to make money. So anybody who thinks that they're not trying to gain mass appeal and they're not in this for ratings or whatever else, yes, they are.
Yes, but I think their approach to it is not exactly how WWE is, where we're just going to diversify our entire audience. We're going to get kids, we're going to get adults, we're going to get families, grandparents, make it so that what we put on TV is going to be enjoyed by every demographic. Whereas AEW is just going to say, you know what? We're a company by wrestlers, for wrestling fans, and that's it. We're not going to try to just create a character just because kids will enjoy them, or water down a great wrestler because this 12-year-old likes it better. Yeah. I think that's what they mean by that.
And the other thing you have to consider is this. There is a reason Vince McMahon continuously puts the title on a guy like Brock Lesnar. I know that angers a lot of fans, but you also have to remember he has a massive company that he has to ensure the success of.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Brock Lesnar, for all purposes, when he comes back, there's always an increase in ratings.
Mm-hmm.
when you're a business owner, not a fan, I'm talking about this from a business owner's perspective. You have to ensure the success of your business. You're going to put the belt on your guy who's going to draw the house. You're going to put your belt on the guy who's going to bring in the ratings. You're going to put your belt on the guy who's selling the merchandise. Now, for right now, that's Brock Lesnar. Are there guys who are better in the ring? Yeah, there's probably a good majority of guys that are better in the ring. But you can write a whole laundry list of guys that were better in the ring than Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan's probably one of the biggest names in the wrestling industry ever. Now, just because fans may say, "Oh, well, Hangman's better in the ring," or Pac's better in the ring, or whoever Laredo Kid is better in the ring than Chris Jericho, that may be the case, but that doesn't mean that that's who they should put the belt on. Your guy who's going to draw the house needs to carry the belt, because now Tony Khan has to ensure that the company goes forward and is successful and they bring money in, because if they're not doing that, they're going out of business.
Right.
So your safe bet right now, based on where they are as a startup company, is obviously Chris Jericho.
Now, here's the argument against this. One thing that people that are fans of AEW and are anti-WWE right now is they want to make sure whatever WWE's doing, AEW doesn't do.
Yep.
If Jericho becomes the first AEW champion, I guess he would be on every week, but let's say he's not and has a very similar schedule like Brock Lesnar.
Mm-hmm.
Does that turn you off that he is the top champion, but when he's on, and it might not be as weekly as people would expect,
yep,
would that turn some fans off?
Yep.
Because he's not there all the time and it's the quote unquote part-time champion thing?
It should. If people are going to get frustrated with Brock Lesnar being a part-time champion, they should be critical of Chris Jericho too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, I understand why Vince continuously put the belt on Brock, and I'd understand why they'd put the belt on Jericho, but I'd hope he'd have a more frequent schedule than Brock. I think one of the biggest issues and the biggest mistakes they did was have Brock be the champion for as long as he did, because he could have carried he didn't need the belt necessarily to have the type of matches he's going to have. He's essentially, his character is almost bigger than the title, which is kind of sad to say, but there are situations where the title makes the guy, or the
title makes the guy.
Yeah, so vice versa. So, and you look at examples of that. So Ric Flair very much brought prestige to the title. I think that's what they're going to try to do with Chris Jericho, whereas putting the title on a guy like a Jinder Mahal, well, no offense to Jinder, but it wasn't necessarily over, and he's not even doing anything right now. So
he's hurt. So.
Well, either way, I mean, even when he was there, it was like he was at the top of the food chain, and then automatically once he lost it, he was like pretty much gone.
Well, here's the other thing that could be brought up too. Now, we do know that the first AEW Championship defense is the second show on TV, I believe, if not the third. I can't remember exactly which one off the top of my head. Now, what if Jericho drops it that night? Because, all right, we got him. He's a draw to ratings, but we want to, build this title and our guys at the same time. So they drop it to a guy like Kenny Omega in the first defense, or Moxley, or whoever it is.
Right.
Does that hurt the title?
Yeah, I think it, and this is the thing, like, fans are always so critical of what WWE was doing, because right now they're the biggest company in the industry. And one of the things that they complained most about was the title getting passed around too much, which that's probably going back 5 years or so, because they've actually had the championships held for extended periods of time recently. So it's not like it's been hot potatoed, at least not the Universal and the Heavyweight Championship, as it was previous years. So look, I mean, if Jericho goes out there and on his second pay-per-view, he holds it for 60 days or however long and loses it, I'm sure people should be critical of that, as they would be with WWE.
I'm not even talking about 60 days. I'm talking like the second TV taping, he drops it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that would be good.
No.
But again, if the second person who holds that then goes on to hold it for a year, I mean, with New Japan, that's one of the things they're adamant about, not having the belt be passed around like a hot potato. Right. And I know that they veered off that a little bit with Tanahashi and Jay White, and then obviously Okada.
But that was because Omega left.
Right.
I don't know if you heard recently, I believe Meltzer reported this, that the original plan was to have Omega versus Okada at MSG as the main event.
And he left.
But he left, so they couldn't do it. So they had to do, Tanahashi's got to take it. But then Jay White became the new Kenny Omega in that regard. But going back to the AEW Championship, I will disagree with you that if Jericho doesn't have it that long, it will hurt the title, because the WWE Championship, that same thing actually happened, because Buddy Rogers only had the title for like 23 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got hot potato for another like 2 weeks before Bruno finally took it and had his historic run.
Yeah.
So that same scenario could happen here in AEW, where Jericho has the title, drops it in 2 weeks, and then Omega or Moxley or whoever has a lengthy run with it, and it won't hurt the title.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that could happen. But, well, All Elite Wrestling's All Out is happening Saturday night. Who ends up being the All Elite Wrestling champion? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video. Share it all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. Subscribe and hit that bell for notifications for the best conversations in AEW, NXT, WWE, and New Japan Pro Wrestling. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti.